12月12号的早上8点到中午12点半开始，观看 Game Award 年度游戏大奖 Twitch 频道30分钟可以获得传送门。注意这个只有早上8点到中午12点半，我会开着台提醒大家。但如果那段时间你完全不在就没救了。接下来会有小级的混沌法术拓荒，0.4的章节拓荒表格也陆续补上了，包含了先拿什么岛屿以及建章选择。再来是过滤器也由我亲手写好，也会陆续补上。我的开机规划是什么呢？答案是没有规划，因为我要玩德鲁伊起手，目前还没有确定要萨满还是神域，要等萨满跟神域各最后一个点接入再说。萨满第2升华之后会有行走灾厄以及升华专属的符文效用，神域会有未知的擎天赋术，可能要等游戏开始之后我们才知道有什么可以用。这是ZiggyD的德鲁伊第一章试玩内容，可以看打王伤害。
My flights to do so. Keep in mind that as this was recorded more than a week from launch, it's non-final and stuff already has changed from what you see here. The new Druid archetype is flavored by the combination of elemental and nature magic combined with shapeshifting into various beast forms.
很早期就有藤蔓了，他这边在放藤蔓。
Task of giving us the potential to play a hybrid of spells and attacks. The human form is where your spellcasting happens, and your beast form.
它的闪射，你们看它串闪射，这个很明显是串的闪射嘛？你看，它变成龙岩形态的时候，一次吐3颗，它每次都一次吐3颗，这看起来是可以闪效应的。
When you start on the beach, this is brought home when you immediately find a staff with lightning bolt to begin spellcasting. However, that is quickly followed by looting the new melee weapon type, a talisman. Talismans function just like any other melee weapon in terms of where your damage comes from. They scale just like.
开场不是给你，它不是给你技能宝石，而是给你变形。
But unique to talismans, they give
然后开场就可以变成狼跟熊。
Shapeshift form using this UI element. Werewolf and bear form is what you have initially, with Wyvern unlocking a little bit later on. This choice doesn't lock you into a form, but rather it just grants you the basic attack of the chosen form.
几乎瞬间变，哇，这个好流畅哦。
Or any other shapeshift ability, you'll automatically shapeshift into that form.
你要去点那个才可以让它技能，所以你不能够变来变去是吗？
Fairly straightforward.
要有两个护符，不然就是你要滑着直接就过去点。
The bear's maul grants rage on hit, while the werewolf's form, for example, creates exploding chunks of ice on attacking frozen enemies. So they're designed to support or reward the other shapeshift skills that you unlock later on.
Feels familiar somehow.
Each of the 3 forms also comes with passive effects and mechanics. The version was like non-final in this regard, but for example, Bear had defensive boosts and generated endurance charges when rage was consumed, while the werewolf gets a sizable out-of-combat movement speed buff, which you can see in its movement as it drops to all 4s. You quickly also get your first actual gem on the beach here, Volcano.
By primal will.
This is a spell that causes an explosion and spits fire projectiles for a long duration. There's a running theme with a lot of the Druid spells that they provide some sort of ongoing benefit and that they often synergize with things that you can do while shapeshifted. This is all to support that idea of hybrid spells and melee shapeshifting, because after all, if it was something a little bit more limited, like a fireball for example, then you have to make a clear decision between whether you use a fireball or one of the shapeshifted attacks. In this case, you can place spells, they'll continue to do stuff while you're shapeshifted. Perfect. More on Volcano later. For now though, we can fight the Miller with volcanoes and follow up with lightning strikes from the staff if we choose, or with our chosen shapeshift forms melee, which is obviously what I go for.
OK， 狼人的起手普攻伤害还很不错哎，讲真的。Abominations。看你们伤害感觉比其他高，然后这边伤害不错哎，这不是第一次怪吗？你们现在已经开始被居位。你们榴莲在干嘛？榴莲开始说，哎呀伤害不错哎，哎呀伤害看起来很棒哎，完蛋了！你们都是居位兵，你们之前对0.4的愤怒呢？你们对 Patch Note 的愤怒在哪里？你们跑去哪了？
Lunar Assault for Wolf and Furious Slam for Bear. I'll test all of them as we go, don't
你们
worry,
现在看
but
到一
I
点点
decided to
甜
kick
头，
off
哎
with
呀，这个
focusing on the
太
bear's
好
slam combination first. The bear's basic attack Maul generates rage on hit and furious slam
哎，
spends
不错哎，
range
画
to
面不
empower
错哎，哎
itself
呦，
with
抓
a
抓
more
抓哎，
powerful explosion that leaves behind jagged
好
ground.
可悲哦，不可能用，这刀我不可能用，北七。
The fact that you're spending rage also means that this constantly maintains endurance charges due to the bear's
刚刚有
passive
翻滚
bonus.
一下，那个熊
Rage
翻
has
滚一
been
下，
simplified across the game,
往前
with
冲一
rage
下
spenders now
啊，不是还有熊
consistently
往
costing
前
10
滚一下
rage,
吗？那个在哪
and a
里？
new visual effect shows in your character to indicate that you have at least 10 rage, making you
哦，开始
glow,
发
even
光
in shapeshifted forms too. So this means that whenever you're glowing, you know that you can use a rage spender. I find the Devourer first up, so we get the first test of our metal a little bit early.
Aye, this reeks of the Devourer's lair.
哦，如果它是熊形态的话，它的声音会变粗哎。
And here we get to see a bit of the potential power of the bear styles combos.
先放火山吗？先放火山，棒！哇操！
So volcanoes spit fire globs at an even pace, but slamming them causes an extra set of projectiles to fire. So placing volcanoes on bosses and bear slamming them while generating and spending rage is a simple and chunky feeling combo. And it makes pretty short work of the Devourer here.
哎呦哎呦哎呦哎呦！哦，两个互相大力震击的。
Counters around here. These are just simple sacrifice platforms, basically kill monster in circle. Thankfully, they
开
aren't
场的
even too
爪击
strict
就有
about you
误
needing
转
to be
兵
in
了
the
哦！
circle.
你看它的
You just
普
kill
攻是
monster
普攻就有误
from
转
the
兵了。
circle. So this video is primarily about the Druid. I'm not really going to be focusing too much on the league mechanic here, but I will touch on my very limited experience with it. The basic premise is kill monsters from 6 circles, and then you go raid a ruined temple for loot and a bunch of crafting options to improve your gear as you level. It's fairly unobtrusive as you play through, and then you get the chance to spend a little bit more time in the actual temple to do something.
OK，藤蔓树
Pretty powerful. For now,
来看一下
though, I
藤
get
蔓
a
树
chance to pick up the wolf skill, Lunar Assault, and the plant spell Entangle, so I'll test those out in the near future. Entangle first. It places a
哇，藤蔓树感觉会是新的瘟疫耶，它可以跟瘟疫一起放哎，它跟瘟疫一起放，感觉是一个群体很棒的一招哎。
Like oil grenade, for example, slowing enemies is really effective on crossbow. I anticipate Entangle might feel similar here as a utility spell.
你看，它这样子做，然后再放瘟疫法术，感觉很棒哎。
So it kind of means that regardless of your actual leveling setup, your build, you can throw in some entangles for some extra damage and slowing. I'm immediately pretty impressed with the feeling of bear form for blasting bosses here. Double empowered volcano slams is very rewarding. And the hybrid gameplay option on Druid means that if you need to kind of back off for a little while, you're taking a bit too much damage, your fluffs are getting run
我觉得最扯
down,
的地方是开场就可以选两种形态了，不是一般来说开场可能只会有一个形态啊，但他们开场就直接可以熊跟狼了。
spells while you're recovering. I'll take
他们知道玩家可能太早退坑了。
form here to comment on the overall feeling of shapeshifting, and it is thankfully seamless. ZiggyD have done a really good job here of leveraging the weapon swap system, especially after they kind of changed it to not have delays and things like that.
OK，
And they've done it in a way that low damage, low movement.
因为熊这个一定要第3下才会震击，它就一定要拍那2下，这感受还是蛮糟的。但你至少你冲刺的时候不会让它重新按一次。哇，这 attack damage 很棒哎，它没有限定近战的，所以开场就会有 8% 的 spell damage 跟 attack damage， 所以我可以用瘟疫法术，然后一样，我先丢灵犀，丢完灵犀之后换成熊形态。十字弩，就你这种人，看到攻击伤害就想要十字弩，永远想躲回去舒适圈。
And now onto the Red Veil Zone, I decided to test the early game Werewolf style a bit more. Lunar Assault is a large slash melee skill that has a very high freeze rate and cold conversion.
好吧，真帅哎！
And that can be paired with the Ice Bite support to give you a big bonus cold damage buff that's up pretty much all the time with this skill, as it freezes so easily on regular mobs and even fairly easily on most bosses.
这都很帅。
As a quick aside, I can confirm that you can be knocked down while sprinting in animal form, and I can confirm that it's just as hilarious as it normally is. Though this only happened like 2 or 3 times in the entirety of my playtime. I'm not sure if I'm just getting better at using it or if the shapeshift forms are naturally more resistant to heavy stuns maybe. Either way, it only happened a few times. Anyway, the werewolf doesn't have any immediate synergy with the volcano stuff, but there's no reason to not just use them anyway. Like you slap them down and then go into melee and tear them apart and you're getting the bonus damage, right? and it's all scaling kind of just as well as each other at this point in the game. The early combination for Wolf is using the shred attack on
对
enemies.
冻结的敌人使用撕裂攻击会有
Shred's
产
that
生额
basic
外的
attack
冰
for
伤。
Werewolf. It's a rapid combination
对
strike with the
Okay.
final hit in 5, I believe, hitting twice. Each hit from Shred on a frozen target chips off a chunk of ice, which then explodes after a decently long delay. The typical approach for rares and bosses is to use Lunar Assault a couple times,
Oh.
freeze them, followed by 1 to 2 full combinations of Shred, with the icicles exploding for some pretty wild burst damage at times, especially on any sort of larger bosses. The icicles do fly backwards behind
但
the
是
target,
你要
but
等
on
到下一次
bosses,
冰冻就很难了，因为第一次冰冻会比第二次冰冻还
most of them tend to hit, especially
还
the bigger
简
ones.
单，
There's
然
a
后
lot
第
more
二
you
次
can
就
do
很
with
难冰
icicles
了，
later
所以
on,
这个
and
这一
more
波
combo
爆
pieces for
发
the wolf form. It's
这一
only
波
just
爆发
this
不能
kind
一
of
直打
basic bit here, but it feels fast and satisfying, and that freeze potency is very high right off the bat. So it's a pretty good early game.
应该
for
都
the
很
werewolf
早期
itself.
我们就有冰冻敌
Honestly,
人
for
的
the
能
first
力了。
half of Rolling Magma plus Volcano as a combo there for fire-focused Wyvern, the magmas trigger the volcanoes. You can incorporate Pounce into wolf form, which gives a bunch of benefits. And you can also grab Wing Blast for like a lightning-focused melee Wyvern with its default attack. Since at this point I was really enjoying the wolf form, I grabbed Pounce, and this is possibly the best all-rounded skill in the entire Druid category. It's a skill of all time, I'll tell you. Big fan. It's a great movement skill that leaps gaps and obstacles, which is enough to use it just by itself, but it also slams and hits a large area of effect, which can be boosted with Fist of War. It marks a target on hit, and it automatically marks the highest rarity target, so it just works. You can link your own mark later on, or you can just use the built-in Predator's mark, which is honestly quite good on this skill. It gives the target increased damage taken. Great. It's based on the number of enemies of your enemy that it has nearby, if that makes sense. So, okay, yeah, if you and your minions are standing next to it, it takes more damage. And it also summons a wolf companion each time you trigger the mark on kill. There's other ways to trigger it later on. So it provides its own minions to trigger Predator's Mark's effect anyway. So this skill does everything. Crazy.
OK， 小吉要睡
Obviously,
觉
it's a
了。
must-
OK， 小吉要睡觉。好，晚安。不，小吉不，拜。
拜。
小吉说他明天还要工作，OK 啊，没事啊，这是我们要有点精力啊，各位。现在还没开
have in
始
wolf
呢
form, but I used it in every single build I tested on Druid. I think if you're using a talisman in your build, you're probably going to want to use this skill. A leap initiator, mark on hit is really good for any melee playstyle, and it's good to just have unless you have like another movement skill that you really want to use instead. I can see you using it. It's important here, I
其
think.
实
that
是
I
它
drive
伤害
home
超
just
高，
how
因为
you
这
want
个
lock to a
你要知道这只金怪是 cold resistance， 它是冰冷抗性怪，然后它在全部都冰伤的情况下把它
It's
冰
important
住，
here, I think, that I
然后还
drive
是对它
home
造
just
成
how you
huge
want
伤
lock
害
to。a form as
所以
well.
其实如
Like,
果它不是
you may
冰抗
know
怪的话，
that,
其实会直接
it's
秒
easy to
杀
just
它
not。really think about it. Your talisman choice is only the selection for which basic attack you have. It doesn't lock you into a form. You don't choose a form like most games like this. It's only important what you choose on your talisman if you actually plan to do some sort of combo with it, and I don't think every build will necessarily use the basic attack. Some of them will because they have some pretty powerful combo effects. But for example, the bear forms one just generated rage, and there's other ways to do that. Rage support gem on another skill, for example, so I can absolutely see not using the bear's basic attack for too long. And you'd only use the werewolf one if you were planning on doing some sort of like icicle-based build, right? So you're absolutely free to leap in as a wolf and then proceed to bear slam everything, for example. And it took me a while to really fully take that in and incorporate that into my gameplay. I still catch myself thinking of each shapeshift form as this like own separate thing, even though I know it's not. But try and like remind yourself to take Druid a bit more holistically, right? It's if there's like a skill or passive bonus from one of the forms that you want to enable some combo or synergy with your build, then use it. Nothing stops you, right? The devs have given some guided and more obviously spelled out combos within each particular like shapeshift
增加累积12%累积。
archetype. Like for example, bears maul generating rage and then slam consuming it, right? Like these are pre-packaged items that we're given as obvious starting points, but there's plenty of room for cross synergies between forms and potentially even other weapon types too. Like I don't see why you couldn't like generate rage on a bear and then consume it in wyvern form for the big flame breath or something. Or even alternate between bear slams and human form mace slams. I'm sure there's a build there. So wolf form, which already felt really good with its high movement speed and attack speed, definitely got faster and more furious with pounce. Overall, this playstyle is a fairly straightforward melee attacker with some room for some pretty good skill expression, I think, in how well you position and freeze and then swap to shred enemies so that you kind of choose which direction the icicles fly off. I think if you are pretty good at it, you can perform, you know, get a little bit of extra juice out of it. But if you just want to Lunar Assault, freeze everything and just kill them with that, like a freeze cleave build, then you absolutely can, I think. It's not as high single target right away as the full bear form combo, unless you get like really nice shotgunning off the icicles on a large boss, for example. But freeze locks down many bosses, and I felt like I was just dismantling any bigger targets, you know. It's like by the time they go to do their first real attack, you freeze them and then they're nearly dead. So a lot of the fights were just kind of over before they began. I did dip my toes into the Wyvern form next to mess around with some of their skills a bit off and on. I played with Rolling Magma and Volcano as a kind of ranged Wyvern. Magma Orb bounces also trigger Volcano's projectile pulse. So it's pretty difficult, I think, to position and take full advantage of, especially if like the enemies are running at you, for example. Something like Entangle can slow enemies down to help with that. So you can throw down some Entangles and Volcanoes and then shoot out some Magma Orbs to do some of that. But it's definitely a more difficult playstyle than what the other ones that I've covered so far offer you at this stage in the early game. This was a bit of a running theme for me with Wyvern in my play session. It's a more complicated form with some very powerful specific elements, but less straightforward lines of play and synergies overall. It's also the one that's probably seeing the most changes from what I played to when it launches. I already know some changes that I'll mention as we go. I will come back to Wyvern a bit more later, because I had my first little temple foray after my 6th Vaal sacrifice here.
This place has gone to ruin.
然后他想要用他最强的形态打，他最强的形态，他的 main 形态是狼人。Okay.
So the League is introduced to you with a just very simple initial design. You place some basic rooms. It almost doesn't matter where you put these first ones. Later on, where you place them upgrades, but it highlights and makes it super easy to no-brain it if you want. And then you just run that small temple to clear the rooms you placed, leaving whenever you want. You don't have like a specific objective here. You can clear the rooms and you'll get like a, I believe, a
对吧？是建议大家啦，这个等到有点卡关感要弄的时候再弄吧。这前面都弄这个10级装备都没什么太大意义，因为你10级其实不太会卡关，游戏是不会卡关的。哦，很早期就有这种富豪。
Elk reroll a magic item, which is really good while leveling.
哦，很早期会给你富豪跟重骰
，rare item and so on. So. Just doing like 1 or 2 of these quick little temple forays each act will give you a pretty decent chunk of gear improvement. I think I did 1 per act. You get a really good amount of items to craft too, but I recommend hanging on to any like specific bases you want to upgrade as you go into one of these. So for example, your next weapon base that you need to craft, you know, you don't have to use crafting currency, you can just go into the temple and make it. Or maybe you like need movement speed boots, so keep a nice pair of boots in your inventory to potentially craft movement speed on. That's how I ended up getting some of my movement speed boots.
Okay.
I never had so much like socketed and quality gear while leveling in Path of Exile 2 as I have with this temple.
I need more time for that.
So after my quick 5-minute temple gearing session, I quickly returned to the cemetery to absolutely embarrass Draven in wolf form. And then I do much the same on Lachlan too, which is often a decent difficulty spike for a lot of builds.
其实他连招打错了，他的月光斩他不该在敌人冰冻的时候还在打月光斩击的，然后这个时候他没有要累积第2次的时候就不用再打月光斩击了。这个月光斩击就是那个会有冰掀起来那个，他其实按普攻就好了。
The other set of Wyvern starter abilities is Melee with Wing Blast and Wyvern's default attack Rend. So Wing Blast is a bit like Spear's disengage skill. It's a backwards leap that can get you out of harm's way and do some other utility things. But in this case, it also is a large AoE that stuns primed for stun enemies and triggers an extra explosion for some nice kind of like AoE clear on those stunned enemies. It also generates charges on stunning enemies, power charges with a surpassing chance, it's called. You can scale it past 100% for more charges, potentially, for example. That's how that works. And one change that ZiggyD has already told me about here with the Wyvern is that this skill has been buffed a bit by granting 3 charges now on stunning unique enemies, which is good because I felt like it was difficult to actually use the power charge stuff in boss fights, but having 3 charges means you can get like 15 seconds plus of empowered attacks or something. You can like chain it through the rest of the boss fight. So I could see you kind of just getting one stun and then that carrying you through the rest of the boss fight as you expend all of your charges. So that does sound like a nice improvement. So the Rend basic attacks can spend a power charge if you aren't currently buffed to give you a buff. With Empowered Lightning attacks, it gives that skill a much bigger AoE and adds lightning damage. And it does a few other things with a few other skills too. It actually turns it from like a very basic little melee attack into like a pretty hefty, big cleaving skill that does quite a lot of damage. Empowered Rend, it is slow, but it is big and chunky and really satisfying, and I'm really hoping that there's some potential for like melee Rend builds that maintain empowerment with that, because it felt really good when I was cleaving my way through packs with it. Wyvern's early
OK， 3个投射，而且这个东西应该是可以闪弹的。
At least when you try to stay purely in Wyvern form, because
然后这东西忘了是
like you can
100% 可以闪弹，因为这是1代的容易翻腾，容易翻腾1代就可以闪弹了。
And then like play your bear build, right? There's no reason you have to kind of like force yourself to stay in any one form if like overall it doesn't feel like it's paying off for you. Still kind of wrapping my head around that. I did also kind of take Wyvern through one of the most difficult areas in the early game here, but once I got through there, the first Spirit Gem gave me options of Savage Fury, which is basically a Druid-like Berserk buff that drains your health for a short boost to speed and damage. It looks very strong.
鹰爪重踏被改掉了吗？重踏在这个游戏被删掉了吗？
Probably well worth it.
我觉得这应该要来个重踏。
Anything that boosts your damage and speed for a duration is usually a popular choice. I didn't get to chest it in this run though, as Spirit Gems are pretty hard to get hold of in the campaign. And I instead went for Briar Patch. So this buff stores some melee physical damage that you deal to enemies to automatically place a thorny ground when you next cast a spell. So if you put a volcano down, it'll be surrounded by... Cast like a lightning strike or something, it'll be thorny ground as well. It's got a built-in delay, but it's super easy to charge up, just like a single cast. It's pretty low impact overall, though I was thinking that there's probably some good utility supports that can go on there later, especially for plant druid styles. Some good utility supports that can go on there later, especially for plant druid styles. Between Thorny Ground, Volcano, Entangle, and Totem at this point, we have a lot of persistent effects we can dump out before engaging in melee. And they all scale fine together at this point in the game, right? Like, so there's no real reason to just not go ham and use everything. It's just like throw everything in the kitchen sink at the boss and then go in and bear slam them. You know, you got time often while most bosses are doing some sort of monologue to like pre-place like 4 entangles, 2 volcanoes, a totem, and automatically place down the other Thorny Ground. So you're absolutely going to go that route. The other notable Spirit Gem choice that I passed up earlier was Herald of Ice, and I wasn't able to get my hands on one for the rest of the 3-act session, which is something I wanted to note because it's a bit of a shame because I played it and loved a lot of the wolf form, but I never really felt like I got the full picture of what it plays like to clear as an Ice Wolf, because it feels pretty good, but it was missing a bit of AoE clear. That's the thing it probably struggled with the most. And not having Herald of Ice was like obviously the missing piece of that puzzle. So just keep that in mind as you watch that wolf gameplay in the future. And just mentally add some of your own ice explosions to that gameplay, just to kind of imagine how your werewolf leveling might go. It's already really satisfying, like doing the icicle explosions and freezing things and watching them shatter. I can only imagine with Herald of Ice how satisfying that's going to be. If I go wolf, I'll definitely grab Herald of Ice. For bear, I'd probably grab that Savage Fury. And Briar Patch if I level like a nature style druid, maybe, I don't know. Activating it with pounce, maybe. I think that's more of a specific build thing. It's nice, but definitely not as impactful as other Spirit Gem choices. Late Act 1, you start to get your first weapon set passives, and unlike leveling other characters, I think you really want to start taking advantage of these right away if you're going spells and shapeshift combo, which I absolutely think you should. It's super fun. So it's pretty simple initially to start doing this. If you've never messed with the weapon set trees, it only really gets confusing when you try to do respecking typically. That's when you kind of got to wrap your head around just how it works. But initially you can basically just kind of like throw any duration or clearly spell-oriented clusters on the staff weapon set and any shapeshift or survivability nodes or melee damage stuff on the talisman set. I spent and tinkered with these a lot as I went, and it felt like a pretty nice payoff for it. There's like quite a lot of it going on that you can cherry pick between in the druid area of the tree. It makes sense. I think passive tree support is like super important for this sort of like hybrid playstyle. And it's good that that kicks into gear pretty early on if you want it. For Executioner, I decided to revisit the Bear Slams since they performed pretty well early on. I was keen to see how they were holding up at this point. I had the Totem now to add in, and that triggers the Jagged Ground from the Empowered Slams to create another explosion for some more bonus combo damage.
You have much to answer for.
钢琴手，钢琴手。前面 BOSS 讲话的时候按了图腾、火山、藤蔓，然后抓2下，第3下猛击，刚好王出来猛击。
Yeah, their form is.
然后换2人形态猛扑，
overall pretty well.
然后再换回雄鸡蛋猛击。
Well-rounded of them, like powerful single target, decent AoE clear, maybe a little bit slower, offset by just switching into wolf form, and nice defenses too. It's pretty nice. And you know, you can just use that pounce to form shift into wolf and start sprinting when you move between packs. There's no reason why bear has to feel slow when you can instantly shapeshift into a wolf whenever you want. I was really vibing the hybrid wolf bear and human spells. It feels like you get to cherry pick the best parts of every part of these kind of 3 forms and just add them together to create a super build. Feels like cheating a little bit. Adding rage and rapid attacks to maul makes it really quick to generate rage for slams as well, with 3 mauls giving you enough for like 2 slams back to back. And when you start double and triple volcano slamming bosses, oh yeah, so good. Poor Candlemass and indeed poor Geonor. Guy really got outclassed on this whole shapeshifting trope even after selling his soul for it, right? So anyway, I don't know if you can hear in the background, but I have a newborn baby and our family is all sick right now. So I'll end part 1 of this preview here and optimistically hope to be able to get part 2 out before launch if I can. I'll try. Forgive me in advance if it's a bit later or if I can't make it. At times like this, I think it's best to just celebrate the small wins. Like, you know, making a part 1 preview and getting it published. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope that it helps a few of you see a bit more of the Druids potentially, you know, the fun that it has to offer you if you're a bit unsure based on that initial reveal. I feel like Druid's getting a little bit of a raw deal in the reactions, so maybe do my part just to give you a little bit more of a realistic impression as to what it looks like. Anyway, folks, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.
OK， 可是猴系到了后面就是它不好的地方是它把所有的伤害都分割到了这些猴系里面，所以假设你这些猴系做完可以128伤害、158伤害，但你的普攻可能只有30%，然后别人不猴系可能是有88、90%的伤害，那大家会选88、90%伤害那个，因为大家可以接受比较伤害低一点，但是刷图跟打王都有稳定的表现，而不是按一堆剑、一堆猴系，然后在这些猴系全部加总起来之前，你会完全没有伤害。这件事情还是我觉得是 POE2 设计的一个核心的问题。玩家，你到底要怎么样让玩家想要用其他的技能？是迫使玩家离开吗？是双顺吗？变冲刺吗？越级吗？盾冲吗？这种纯粹的移动技能吗？还是你希望玩家在打王的时候按2下诅咒，按个诅咒，按个印记，然后再来全身就不用按，或者是攻击时释放印记，然后全身都按一个技能 ？POE1 确实是有这个战斗，在战斗风格上，它就是一个剑到底，然后基本上在大多数99%的情况下，你只要按一个主技能就好，因为6L 只有一个。你的6L 通常只会有一个，少数情况下你可能会有两组会6L， 但原则上那第2组6L 也不会是拿来放攻击技能。所以2代他们今天要去做这种钢琴手的事情，那到底要怎么样有足够的诱因让玩家去猴系，然后这些猴系呢又可以给不要过多的好处，以至于让玩家感觉自己很像马戏团猴子，或者是 MMORPG 里面的一些很难的操作角色。就根本上来说 ，Jonathan 想象的那个游戏，整个 GG 想象的那个游戏存在这个世界上吗？它不是独立制作的 ARPG 动作游戏，它不是黑帝斯，它不是死亡细胞，它不是那个独生者2，就那个西班牙做的那个很像卷轴游戏。如果你知道我讲哪一款的话，就是你跟怪物有需要那么多的互动吗？他们想的那款游戏是在世界上有可能发生的吗？一个 ARPG， 然后它是跟装备有关，跟后期内容有关，跟不同的王有关。可是你要跟每一只王都要互动啊，你又有市场系统， 以至于所有人都想要选最强的职业，然后别人又会有剥夺感，是说，哎呀，别人职业打这个王只要10秒，为什么我要打1分钟啊？哎呀，这个剥夺感怎么回事？那你今天要把这全部的职业都平衡好，这之间是有可能发生的吗？这个游戏有存在这个世界上，还是它是独角兽？我悲观一点讲，我觉得这个游戏是不可能发生的。